My name is Marian Keaton. I'm 62. That evening, Savannah's air pressed thick against the windows, carrying the scent of fried shrimp and dish soap. The twins darted around the kitchen island, laughing, their small hands smearing the counters I'd just wiped clean. Mark sat in his usual spot on the couch, half watching the television. Lila scrolled on her phone, one bare foot resting on the coffee table, a glass of wine balanced in her other hand. I stirred the pot on the stove shrimp and grits, my late husband's favorite, when Lila looked up and said, "You really are our live-in helper, aren't you?" She said it like a joke. But it wasn't funny. The words landed heavy, sticky as the air. Mark gave a short laugh, the kind meant to smooth over awkwardness, and avoided my eyes. I set the wooden spoon down gently. The clock on the wall ticked, sharp and steady. Helping had been temporary. That was what they'd said when I first moved in after my husband died. Just until the twins are older, Mark promised. A year or two, maybe 3. That was 5 years ago. Since then, I'd become the one who noticed when the milk ran out, who paid the overdue bills before the power company's calls turned threatening, who ironed Mark's shirts and folded Lila's dresses left in the dryer. It wasn't duty that kept me, it was habit. And love, though, even love can start to feel like labor when no one notices the weight of it. Lila laughed again, showing me something on her phone I didn't bother to see. "Don't forget to pack the twins' lunches for tomorrow." "Marian," I nodded out of reflex. But my hands had already stopped moving, and somewhere deep inside, something else did too. The next night, everything changed. Dinner the next night felt rehearsed roast chicken, store wine, the twins already in their pajamas so they wouldn't interrupt. Lila had arranged the table like she was hosting guests instead of sharing a meal with family. I placed the mashed potatoes in the center and sat down last, as usual, for a few minutes. The sound of forks against plates was the only conversation. Then Lila cleared her throat. "Mark and I talked about something today," she began, slicing her chicken too carefully. "It's about the living arrangement." I kept my eyes on my plate. She smiled, thin and practiced. "If you're going to keep staying here, we think it's only fair you contribute. Either you pay rent or you watch the twins full-time. Childcare costs a fortune. You know." Mark let out a small laugh, the kind you try to hide when you're caught off guard. "You know how tight things are." "Mom, Lila's just trying to make things clear." The room blurred for a second. The steam from the potatoes rose and vanished, the way I suddenly felt myself doing. I wanted to say that the lights they ate under came from my credit card, that the refrigerator hummed on my account. But my throat refused to move. I folded my napkin carefully, setting it beside my untouched plate. "I see," I said quietly. Lila leaned back, relieved, already reaching for her phone again. Mark poured more wine, pretending to be calm. The twins laughed from the hallway, bright, trusting sounds. I listened, and something inside me gave way like an old hinge, small but final. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat in the dark kitchen with only the fridge lights spilling across the tiles. The air smelled faintly of detergent and leftover wine. My laptop blinked on the counter where I'd left it earlier, its glow reflecting off the stainless steel sink. I opened my online banking page, one by one. The familiar charges lined up: Georgia Power, Savannah Gas, Publix groceries, the home insurance renewal I'd paid last month when Mark forgot. All of it under my name. Rent in every way but title. Scrolling through the statements, I noticed the grocery delivery from Tuesday, $146.82, my card. The twins' shoes were ordered from Target. My account again. Even the streaming service she used for her shows, the autopay was still tied to my old debit card. I didn't cry. The shock had already drained itself out of me at the table. What filled me now was something steadier, quieter, like a tide turning beneath the surface. I wasn't angry at first, just awake. For years, I'd believed family was a circle everyone gives, everyone receives. But what I'd built here wasn't a circle. It was a well I kept filling while everyone else drank freely. The refrigerator hummed, steady as breath. I took out the half-empty bottle of white wine and poured a glass, not to celebrate, not to mourn, just to mark the hour I finally saw my life clearly, in the quiet. I closed each browser tab, one by one, until the screen went black. The house felt different then, smaller somehow, like I'd stepped outside it already, upstairs. Someone shifted in their sleep. I turned off the light and stood for a long moment, listening to nothing but the sound of my own decision forming. By midnight, the house had folded itself into silence. Even the twins' nightlight cast a tired glow, flickering across the hallway like a small pulse. I sat on the edge of my bed, shoes on, suitcase half open, the same one I'd used when I moved in 2 years ago. It didn't look as big anymore. The decision had been made long before that night. I was only catching up to it. I opened my laptop one last time, logged into each account, and I scheduled the cancellation of every auto-pay electricity, gas, internet effective at the end of the month. The confirmation emails arrived like small, steady heartbeats. One by one, the invisible strings that held this house together snapped quietly. On the nightstand, I wrote a note in my careful handwriting. Bills are yours now. I didn't sign it. They would know. When I reached the twins' room, I stood in the doorway for a long time. Their small breaths rose and fell in rhythm, soft as the ceiling fan. I didn't feel anger, only the kind of love that knows when to stop sacrificing itself. I brushed a curl from one boy's forehead, whispering something I can't even remember now. Something gentle enough not to wake him, but firm enough to mark goodbye. The floorboards creaked as I walked down the hall. Barefaced, hair pinned back, I felt like a stranger in my own house. Outside, the air wrapped around me, warm and heavy with the smell of gardenias. I wheeled my suitcase to the curb, the night insects buzzing like a quiet orchestra. Behind me, the porch light stayed off. No one stirred. No one called my name. I took a deep breath, unlocked my old sedan, and drove away from the house that had mistaken my devotion for rent. The studio I found sat on the second floor of a weathered brick house near Forsyth Park. It was barely big enough for a bed, a small table, and a chair. But the first morning I woke there, I realized space had never felt this wide. The windows faced a line of oaks heavy with Spanish moss. When the wind moved, it sounded like a slow conversation between old friends. I brewed coffee on a small stovetop pot I'd bought from a thrift store, the kind that hissed before it poured. The air smelled of roasted beans and damp leaves. There were no footsteps in the hallway, no dishes waiting in the sink. The quiet felt full, almost tangible, pressing gently against the walls. It filled the corners, pressed gently against the walls, as if the room were exhaling for the first time in years. I unpacked carefully, one drawer at a time, a few books, a folded blanket, a photograph of my husband from our last trip to Tybee Island. I set it on the shelf beside the coffee mug I liked best, the one that said, Monday's Child. That afternoon, I walked to the park. The fountain shimmered under the sunlight, and children ran through its mist while parents called out from benches. No one knew me there. No one expected anything from me. When I returned, the sun was setting through the thin curtains, painting the walls in soft orange. I sat on the edge of the bed, coffee in hand, and listened to the refrigerator hum, to the birds outside, to nothing in particular. For the first time in years, I didn't feel needed. I just felt present. By the third morning in my new place, my phone began to light up like a warning beacon. First came Mark's message. Mom, Did you forget to pay the electric bill? The power's out. Then Lila's, sharp as a thorn. You left your responsibilities behind. The mortgage is overdue. We're drowning here. I read them while sitting at the little table by the window. The smell of coffee rising like armor around me. The park outside shimmered with early heat, and a group of joggers passed beneath the trees, their laughter faint but steady. The notifications came in a steady stream, each buzz like a small drumbeat against my nerves. You can't just walk away from your family. You were supposed to help. You're being cruel. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed up rocking the twins so they could sleep in. The afternoons were spent cooking, while Lila posted pictures captioned, "Family dinner," without mentioning who made it possible. I thought of my name on their bills. The invisible spine of a house that never said thank you. The phone buzzed again. "We can't believe you're doing this to us." Lila wrote, "We've always been there for you." I almost laughed. I set the cup down, wiped a ring of moisture from the table, and typed one word back, oh, no explanation, no apology. Just a small, steady refusal that felt more honest than anything I'd said in years. Then I turned off the phone, slid it into a drawer, and opened the window. Warm air swept in, carrying the scent of jasmine and cut grass. The city moved beneath me, alive and indifferent. For the first time in a long while, I felt that indifference, and it felt like peace. 3 weeks passed before the invitation arrived. It came through a polite text from Mark's mom. "We'd like to have you over for dinner. Lila's cooking. The boys miss you." For a moment, I stared at the screen, uncertain whether to laugh or sigh. Still, curiosity won. I wanted to see the house, not the one with walls and furniture, but the one made of habits I'd quietly built and abandoned. That Friday, I drove through the old neighborhood just as the sun was setting. The magnolias were blooming, their scent thick in the air. From the driveway, the house looked unchanged, but something about it felt off. Like a painting hung slightly crooked. Inside, the lights were too bright. Lila greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You look wonderful," she said. Voice syrupy and taut. The table was set neatly, though the silverware didn't match and the roast smelled faintly burnt. Mark hugged me quickly and poured me a glass of cheap red wine. "We're glad you came," he said. The twins were already asleep elsewhere, she said. "A little space for everyone." She added, "We ate in small, careful bites." Conversation floated around safe topics: the boys' school, the weather, an old neighbor who'd sold his car. It all felt staged, as if we were actors reading lines from a script labeled family dinner. Halfway through, Mark cleared his throat. "Things have been hard since you left," he began, glancing at Lila. "The bills, the kids, it's been stressful." Lila nodded, eyes wide with practiced sincerity. "We just thought maybe you could move back, just for a little while, until we're stable again." The words landed like cold rain. I set down my fork, tracing the rim of my glass with one finger. "I see," I said softly. The silence that followed stretched thin. Mark tried to smile. "It'd really help everyone." I looked at him, then at Lila. Her gaze held no warmth, only need, sharp and hungry. And in that moment, I understood they didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. I folded my napkin neatly, placed it beside my plate, and felt the first calm breath I'd taken all evening. I excused myself after dinner, murmuring something about washing my hands. Lila smiled too quickly, eager to believe the evening had gone well. Mark nodded, relief flickering across his face. They wanted to think things were smoothing over, that I was returning to the rhythm they understood: quiet, useful, compliant. The hallway light hummed faintly as I walked toward the bathroom. The air felt thick, scented with overcooked meat and the faint tang of bleach. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, letting the quiet settle. The mirror above the sink reflected a woman I barely recognized, tired eyes, calm mouth, steady shoulders. I turned on the cold water first. The pipes shuddered, then released a rush that filled the small room with sound. I added the hot tap. Steam rose, curling against the glass, blurring the reflection until only outlines remained. My hands hovered above the sink, not to wash, but to feel the vibration of the water as it thundered downward. It was strange, the satisfaction that came with it. For years, I had fixed every leak in that house, the dripping faucet, the running toilet, the sink that wouldn't drain. I was always the one who bent, tightened, adjusted, always the one who made it right again. Tonight, I let them run. A small rebellion in the familiar routine, the room filled with fog, the sound steady and full, like the heartbeat of something finally released. I stepped back, breathing in the warmth until my skin dampened. On the counter, a small hand towel lay folded, the same floral pattern I'd bought 2 Christmases ago. I brushed my fingers across it once, then turned toward the door. When I opened it, steam rolled into the hallway, soft and ghostly. Lila looked up from her seat at the table, confusion flickering across her face. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said. My voice came out even, almost gentle. "You can clean it up yourselves." Mark started to rise, a question on his lips. But I was already walking toward the front door. The sound of the running water followed me, echoing through the house like an old song they'd never learned the words to. Outside, the night was cool and still. I stepped off the porch without looking back. The door closed behind me, muffling the noise until it was only memory, still rushing somewhere I no longer belonged. The calls started again 2 days later, first from Mark, then from numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't answer. The messages filled my voicemail anyway. Voices sharp with panic, pleading wrapped in blame. They cut the electricity again. The car had been towed. A note left on the windshield. Another reminder of the boundaries I'd set. "We just need a little help, Mom." I deleted them without listening twice. The silence that followed wasn't cruel. It was clear. A line had finally been drawn. Not out of anger, but necessity. I'd spent years mistaking exhaustion for love, but now the distance between us felt like oxygen. In the mornings, I started walking to the community literacy center a few blocks from my apartment. The building smelled of chalk dust and coffee, and the sound of turning pages filled the rooms. I signed up to help adults studying for their GEDs. The first morning, I tutored a woman named Clara who worked nights cleaning offices. Her hands were cracked from detergent, her smile shy when she read aloud for the first time without stumbling. When she finished the paragraph, she looked up at me and whispered, "I didn't think I could still learn." "You never stopped," I told her. Something about that moment anchored me more than any family tie had in years. The giving here was different. It didn't drain me. It fed something that had been empty far too long. After class, I walked home through the park. Spanish moss trembled in the wind, and children's laughter spilled from the playground. I bought a small loaf of bread from the corner bakery and carried it home warm against my chest. That evening, I sat by the window, slicing it carefully, spreading butter over the first piece while the sky deepened to blue. My phone blinked with another missed call. I turned it face down. Outside, the street lights flickered on one by one, glowing steady and unbothered. I chewed slowly, the taste simple and right, like something finally earned. Spring came early that year. The river outside my apartment glimmered under the first warmth of March, the air soft with salt and honeysuckle. I'd lived there long enough, about 5 months, to memorize the rhythm of the tides and the way the light shifted across the floor in late afternoon. The apartment had grown into itself, a potted fern by the window, a stack of library books beside the couch, and a new porch light I'd chosen at a hardware store on a quiet Sunday morning. I liked its simplicity brass frame, clear glass. Nothing ornate, just enough to make the doorway glow when the sun went down. Sometimes, after my shifts at the literacy center, I'd linger by the Riverwalk, waving to the same joggers and fishermen who'd become familiar faces. People here called me Miss Marian, a small kindness that made me smile every time. One evening, Clara, the woman I'd been tutoring, stopped by with her GED certificate folded neatly in her hand. She'd passed. We drank coffee on the porch, talking until the sky turned violet and the water below caught the first glint of moonlight. When she left, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "You helped me believe again." After she drove off, I stood there alone, the air gentle against my skin. Across the river, porch lights flickered on in scattered homes, small beacons dotting the dark. For years, I'd turned on lights for others, waiting for someone to come home, to say thank you, to see me. I stepped forward, reached for the switch, and watched my own light bloom across the porch. The glow reached the railing, then faded into the trees. "This light isn't for waiting anymore," I said quietly. "It's for peace." Inside, the kettle began to hum. I closed the door behind me, leaving the light burning steady, warm, quiet, and entirely mine.